Kyle Shanahan lovable, Joe Shasky? Would you consider Kyle Shanahan a lovable figure?
No, but I don't think I don't think Bill Parcells was lovable, and I don't think Belichick's lovable. Like I think there's many different personality types for coaches that work.
One coach
is Spoelstra lovable?
Ooh, that's a great one. Probably not. He's on edge all the time.
If I took away the LeBron years, he's got a lot of Shanahan in him. He does. Schemes it up, and then his teams go really far. I mean, probably farther than most would expect. And then he loses at the end in the finals, but it's an accomplishment even getting there.
Correct. Twice, and I think both times he reached the finals. Clearly, his teams were lesser compared to their opponents. That Lakers squad in the bubble. Say the bubble, I get it. They were home. If you want to throw that one out there, but I still think it was a tremendous accomplishment. And then Jimmy Butler's now he's a one in the sense like he can be a one if you don't have like a LeBron or a Steph on your team. But I think really you would like him to be a very high-end number 2 on your squad. Yeah. But the fact that he's taken him to 2 finals, it's a credit to him. And when we're talking about head coaches right now, because I just think it's interesting how we view head coaches in the Bay Area, because you eloquently put it, we just have such a rich history here in the Bay Area. John Madden, Bill Walsh, Tom Flores, Seifert, I don't think gets the credit he deserves.
No doubt.
Tony La Russa, Dusty Baker, Bruce Bochy, amongst others. Hell, I know in he's the Giants manager now. Like Bob Melvin was really good. He was really good for the A's for a very long time. They won a lot of games. He had a couple iterations where they had to tear it down, bring it back up, and he gets credit for that. He just has a lot of shortcomings in the playoffs, and sometimes them's the breaks when you're facing Justin Verlander in Game 5 twice. Like you have Sonny Gray or Bartolo Colon, that's just it's not good enough. So sometimes them the breaks, and sometimes if you're Kyle Shanahan, you're going up against Patrick Mahomes, and it's just that's what happens, right? Now I would say Kyle Shanahan is a more accomplished. He is a better coach in his sport than Bob Melvin, but it just goes back to how we view coaching. And we're going to play this little compilation here, not here, but maybe in the next segment or the end of this one. But just how 49ers fans feel about Kyle Shanahan, I thought was very telling yesterday. There was like 20 of them. Just when you hear the name Kyle Shanahan, you say what? And it was just fascinating.
You brought up George Seifert. Do you have any recollection on why George Seifert got let go?
Not really. I was like 5 or 6 when it happened, but enlighten me in the audience.
Well, no, it's just like, he was the DC. He's a San Francisco native, always criminally underrated. The czar of defense during the 80s for a lot of those Bill Walsh teams. Like, I think Belichick has been elevated by being which rightfully for being DC for Bill Parcells. Parcells was a defensive guy, too, even though Belichick was the whole scheme. I mean, essentially created the whole thing. Seifert did that side of the ball. And he's the guy who basically taught people like Pete Carroll, how to be a coach on that side of the ball. So I have a lot of respect for George Seifert. Some would say he was very hands-off when it came to offense. Some would also say, he inherited Bill Walsh's team, which is true. Like the 89, 90 team, into 91, that was guys that Bill Walsh had put in place. But then they revamped themselves. Listen to how many wins he had each year. His record was 98-30 in 8 seasons with the Niners. 14-2, Super Bowl. 14-2, losing the NFC Championship game. 10-6, they missed the playoffs. That's the year, Steve got hurt in the middle of it, but basically Montana was out for the whole year. Bono had to play. 92, 14-2, lose to the Cowboys in the NFC Championship game. 10-6 in 93, losing the NFC Championship game. 13-3, you win the Super Bowl. The next year, 11-5, you lose in the division round, first game against Green Bay. The next year, 12-4, and they lose in the playoffs. 12-4, and he's fired. He was 98-30.
That's actually incredible. That's like, I feel like Draymond Green, that's
absolutely incredible.
Now, Shanahan's been unbelievably successful. 54-29 since 2019.
You want a ring?
2.
Yeah. No, but I'm saying prior to that, right before, you just get fired, you're just 2 years removed from it. That's like Doug Peterson with the Eagles. And that was their first ever championship. And then 2 years later, see ya.
Now, times are different. And they wanted to spicing up the offense. There was a lot going on, right?
But I do think it's interesting where we view the Bay Area sports landscape as we're very patient, right? We're not Philadelphia.
Yes.
We're not New York.
So true.
We'll let Gabe Kapler hang out for a little bit. It's fine. It's cool. You know what? They're trying their best, you know. But they were ruthless in the 90s, because they were the team of the NFL. And they expected it, and the Cowboys kicking their ass a bunch like that. I'm sure that contributed to it.
Absolutely.
And it is interesting that both those the head coaches inherited the teams, right? Barry Switzer with the Cowboys, and then Seifert, obviously with Bill Walsh, and then Switzer obviously with the Jimmy Johnson. So, yeah, that's...
You couldn't get through Holmgren, too. So Holmgren was on the staff, and then he leaves, and you weren't going to hire him at that time because you'd won a Super Bowl with Seifert, and Holmgren had his number. Like, there's just no other way around it. Favre and Holmgren, and obviously the Dallas Cowboys prior to that, had his number, and you needed to make sense. So I'm not saying that same thing's happening now, but the Chiefs have our number right now. Like, and there's just, it's okay. You can say it, and it sucks, and it's tough to wear. But who outside of them has your number if you're Shanahan? Like, I think losing to them in the Super Bowl is not some fall from grace. It sucks. I don't love it, but I just don't see how you upgrade from them.
Well, you look at that, like, it's interesting because you look at the performances from the quarterback with Brock Purdy in the last, ever since Christmas night, right, against the Ravens. He didn't have his best stuff since then. And maybe we'll see that week 1 against the Jets in less than 2 weeks on Monday Night Football when Aaron Rodgers and Bob Saleh come into town. But you didn't see his best going there. And yet they kept still winning and winning and winning. I think a lot of that is the head coach and being in these situations before, even with a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo. Hell, Brock Purdy in his first run, he didn't have his best game against the Dallas Cowboys. That was a very physical and violent and defensive struggle. Both quarterbacks struggled. Brock Purdy struggled just a little bit less. He didn't give up, a couple picks like Dak Prescott did, and that was the difference. And I think he learned from that. He limited his mistakes against the Packers. You got lucky. You got to have some luck because Donald Savage drops the pick 6. That could have changed the whole thing. Maybe you are one and done. But you know what? They got lucky there. They had the ladybug catch or whatever with Ayuk. You got a little luck. It's better to be lucky than good sometimes. But they had a little luck along the way, and I think that was when Niners fans really started to believe more and more. And it's like, man, you know what? If not now, then when? And then you face a team in Kansas City Chiefs, Joe Shasky, that everyone all year long was saying it's on a tee to knock this team off. Why are we letting them hang around? Justin Herbert gets hurt for the Chargers. The Raiders are an S show. They fire McDaniels. And the Broncos are the Broncos. Russell Wilson is just not the guy anymore. So they cakewalk the AFC West with 10 or 11 wins, whatever they get. They get the Dolphins in negative 30-degree weather. They weren't going to win that game. I love Tua. Actually, I don't love him that much. But that wasn't going to happen. And then they go...
I love Tua. I don't love him that much.
Sorry, Ken. And then they go to Buffalo. And then they win that. Oh, you can't win on the road. And then they go to Baltimore. They win that. Like... It was just a perfect storm, I felt like, for Niners fans. They were finally feeling it, Joe Shasky, and then it got ripped beneath them.
And they were relatively healthy.
Yes.
Relatively.
Christian McCaffrey was healthy, and he fumbles on the first drive. Brutal.
And the quarterback's healthy.
The quarterback, everyone. Trent Williams is healthy.
The primary defensive players were, for the most part, healthy. I think a lot of this has to go to a couple of things. Number one, I think the quarterback situation prior to Purdy plays a lot into everybody's thoughts of Shanahan. And I think the overtime rule thing. I really think that the overtime rule thing, it leaves a sour taste in everyone's mouth, and it's very difficult to defend. Not understanding and then saying that you did, but we kind of see all this other audio that said you didn't necessarily understand the rules and not necessarily owning up to it. I do believe the overtime, although... For some people, it's unforgivable. For me, I go back and forth on it. It's very frustrating. You got to know the rules, though. That's what made Belichick is knowing every little stupid rule. John Harbaugh does not have a Super Bowl if he doesn't understand. He was a former special teams coach when they played the Niners, and after the Niners had that sequence where they threw the fade to Crabtree, Baltimore got the ball back.
Yeah, and they had the punter hang out a little bit in the corner.
Which was a genius play by him, and he had been working on it forever. Little areas of the rules and understanding how to don't kneel yet. You got to hold on to the kneel, and they did a great job in that sequence, and they were prepared for that. It looked like the Niners weren't prepared for something that was pretty straightforward from the beginning of the year. And that's tough because that does fall back on coaching.
Absolutely. 888-957-9570. Talking Kyle Shanahan right now. Is there a head coach in the NFL you would take over Kyle Shanahan? I'm going to say outside of Andy Reid, but you can say Andy Reid if you want. Again, Andy Reid has the luxury of the greatest quarterback potentially in the history of the sport. Doesn't take anything away from him. He did take Donovan McNabb to the Super Bowl, to 4 straight NFC championships. He had a great run with Mike Vick. Alex Smith got to the playoffs a bunch of times. So he's a hell of a coach. But Kyle Shanahan, you're going to hear what fans thought about him on the other side. We have a little compilation. So that's going to be there. And then at 7 o'clock, Joe Shasky, we got Way Back Wednesday. And it's a hump day. Walk back. I said Way Back Wednesday. That's a townie special right there. Way Back Wednesday here on 95.7 The Game. We got a Walk Back Wednesday. That's a new segment we just debuted last week. It's so new that I forgot the name of it. So we're going to do that at 7 o'clock. We're going to ask Ken and Carter. They got to come up with some too. Basically, some takes. It could be sports related. It could not be non-sports related that you are feeling pretty bad about and that you want to walk back.